Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Bill Austin Radio Studio for Bottom of the Sixth. I'm Jason Teeter.
I'm Will Anderson.
And I'm Jack Kemmler.
We have a jam-packed episode coming up. We're going to start off with the big thing that happened this week, Yankees-Dodgers. We're going to talk about MLB. Jack, kick it off for us.
Yeah, so Dodgers took it home, 4-1 series, a gentleman's sweep against the Yankees. I think the first thing to talk about was Game 5. It felt like the Yankees had the momentum after that Game 4 huge victory, blowout victory. Game 5, they were rolling, and they were up 5-0, and then the fifth inning came, and basically just chaos erupted. Dodgers put up a 5 spot, and that was basically all unearned runs. Judge made an error. Volpe made an error. Rizzo made an error, but they blame it on Cole. It was just a disaster of a fifth inning, and that just turned the tide. Dodgers were able to squeak it out. Huge story with Walker Buehler getting the save there. He was a guy who, in 2022 in the postseason, Max Scherzer couldn't make a start, so they had Buehler go on 3 days rest, and that's how he got the Tommy John surgery. That's how he got injured, torn UCL. 2 years trying to come back from the injury. Didn't have that great of a regular season, had a horrible postseason up to the World Series, had a great start in Game 3, and then Buehler getting the save, storybook ending for the Dodgers with a gentleman's sweep over the Yankees.
Yeah, it was honestly this series never felt like the Yankees really had it at any point. Yeah, they won Game 4. Yeah, they were in it until the ninth inning in Game 1. But to be honest, this was the Dodgers just trampling the Yankees every single game. It felt like kind of that Mets-Dodgers series. Whoever got out in front of that lead, they were going to win the game. Obviously, those 5 earned runs on Cole, they were the difference in this entire series. I felt like the Yankees had the momentum. You win Game 5, you go back to LA, you win one more, and you make it a play-in for Game 7. But it brings up a question. How decent did the AL actually stack up to the NL? Because if the Dodgers had to play the NL or the AL slate that the Yankees did, they might have not lost a game.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering. Is if you do a power ranking of the postseason, where do you have the Yankees? In my opinion, I would go Dodgers, Mets, Padres, Phillies or Brewers. I wouldn't even have the Yankees above the Phillies or the Brewers. I mean, I don't like. Yes, they walk through that. Like they walk through the AL, but the AL is not good. And then once they got met by the Dodgers, it was not a close series.
And we can see that there. I think the big thing that came down with the Yankees and also the Dodgers, and I think it was a lot of teams this year, we didn't see that elite pitching that we've seen in the last few years. If you look at recent champions, right, and you look at their rotations and their pitching staff, there's always the ace that leads these teams. And yes, there's some good pitchers on the Yankees. You got Garrett Cole, but he's not like an ace as much as he used to be, right? Yes, he put up 6 2/3 in that game and was very good, but he fell apart there at the end, or middle to end. And you don't really see a lot of teams right now with aces, right? And I think that's the problem in the AL is, yes, Skubal was the guy for the Tigers, and you looked how far he carried a bad Tigers team. You just need to get more aces in the AL. And that will turn us to what we're going to talk about right now is 2024-2025 free agency, right? Teams can start talking to players at 5:01 Eastern on Monday, right? You have guys who like Christian Walker, Pete Alonso, Gleyber Torres, and also Corbin Burns now leaves the Orioles, declines the option, goes, and is now a free agent. You have studs up and down the board of free agency. And the real question is, guys, let's talk about it right now. Juan Soto, where does he go? Jack, let's talk about it.
It's going to be whoever gives them the most money. You saw him say in the post-game interview after they lost the World Series. You thought, they asked him, would you want to come back to the Yankees? He said, I'm just going to take the best offer. He didn't even say, I love being here at the Yankees. If I got a great offer, I would come back. It doesn't even sound like he wants to be back with the Yankees. It's going to be whoever gives them the biggest offer. The talk is right now is that the Mets and Steve Cohen are always going to, have the biggest offer, but it could be any team. It's really just Juan Soto, Scott Boras. That is two guys who just want money, and we're looking at upwards of $650 million.
Yeah, I think it's going to be either the New York teams or it's either going to be that or it's going to be the two West Coast teams in the Giants and the Dodgers. Look, the Giants need to land a free agent. It's been time and time again. You don't get Harper, you don't get Judge, you don't get Ohtani, and now there's a reputation. Guys don't want to play for SF. It's a bad city, this and that. Well, if they want to make a splash, Buster Posey, that new regime, they got to go and they got to get Juan Soto. And on the other side, south of San Francisco, you have the LA Dodgers. Obviously, we know they're not going to shy away from spending money. And to me, I think if the Dodgers do wind up getting Juan Soto, there needs to be some sort of like rule in place, some salary cap, some salary force, something. There is no way that they should have Freddie Freeman, Mookie Betts, Shohei Ohtani, Yoshinobu Yamamoto, all those guys, and then on top of that, you can afford Juan Soto. That to me would be insane.
Well, and it's crazy how they did. They're deferring so much of this money, and how is that going to affect their teams going in the future, right?
Oh, yeah.
Is it going to destroy these Dodger teams for 10 years and you have a big fan base that's being like, what are we doing, right? And I'm going to go back to Juan Soto. He is just one of the great outfielders. This outfielder class, infield's kind of like lacking, but you look at the outfielders, right? Cody, Harrison Bader, Anthony Santander, who had 44 home runs, Teoscar Hernandez. You're looking at Tyler O'Neill, Profar, Matt Canna, Michael Conforto. This is a studded outfield class. And going back, the pitchers, Corbin Burns, Garrett Cole, Blake Snell. We're going all the way down. Charlie Morton, Sean Manaea, Clayton Kershaw, Shane Bieber, Max Scherzer. I can keep going. I can talk for a good 2 minutes about the guys who are quality stars who are going to be free agents. It is a big free agent class for those two, and these teams are going to have to capitalize on these big-time free agents and spend some money. Let's flip our focuses over to some NASCAR. Let's talk about some NASCAR. Will, give it to us.
All right, season coming down to the wire. Just 2 more races left. They got Martinsville this upcoming weekend and then Phoenix the weekend after that. But let's talk about last weekend, the Straight Talk Wireless 400 at Homestead Miami Speedway. What a race this was, guys. It was absolutely passing all over the field. Nobody really dominated. Tyler Reddick is the one who comes out with the win, the number 45 Toyota Camry for 2311 Racing. Denny Hamlin, Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan was actually there, celebrated with him after the race on the front stretch. Really cool thing to see. Let's go through the top 10 finishers. You got Tyler Reddick in first, Ryan Blaney second, Denny Hamlin third, fourth Christopher Bell, rounding out that top 5. Chase Elliott had a great day. William Byron sixth, Alex Bowman seventh, AJ Allmendinger eighth, Carson Hocevar ninth, and finishing out this top 10 is going to be Ryan Preece, scoring himself a nice finish. And the story of the race was obviously the high line, right? When you're at Homestead Miami, you're able to run the very top of the fence. It gives you the most momentum coming out of the turn. You know, a lot of people think when you race cars, the best line is going to be at the bottom. That's the shortest way around the racetrack. Well, while that is the case, at Homestead Miami, you get a ton of momentum on the top of the racetrack. So that's where a lot of guys like to go. Tyler Reddick specifically has been probably the best at doing so, and that's what got him the win in this race. He passed Denny Hamlin and Ryan Blaney on the last lap in the last set of turns to win this race. He locks himself in to the championship four. We'll talk about that here as we go to the playoff standings. In first is going to be Tyler Reddick, second Joey Logano, third Christopher Bell, and fourth William Byron. If there was no race this weekend, this would be your championship four. Now for the cutoff, on the bubble, it's going to be Kyle Larson -7, Denny Hamlin in 6th -18 points, Ryan Blaney -38, and Chase Elliott -43. Those two guys, they're going to need a win if they want to make it to Phoenix. Interestingly enough, in 2020, Chase Elliott won, being under the cut line, got himself to Phoenix, won the championship. And last year, Ryan Blaney, under the cut line, needed a win at Martinsville to make it to the championship four. He did that as well and then won the championship. So these guys have been in this situation before. They could do it again. And, you know, we talk about Phoenix is coming up soon. Miami should hold the championship, in my opinion. It's a much better racetrack. I think that the fans are going to go want to see that over Phoenix. Obviously, I'm going to be biased towards Phoenix. I get to go to that race every year and cover it as part of Blaze Radio. But I still think Miami is a better racetrack suited for the championship race. And let's get now to the Xfinity 500 at Martinsville this Sunday, 2 p.m. NBC. Like I said, this is a must-win for guys like Ryan Blaney, for Chase Elliott. Denny Hamlin and Kyle Larson are going to have to run good races. You've only got 2 spots up for grabs. And this is going to be the hardest race of the entire season for those guys. These are the smallest track in NASCAR. It's going to be chaos. They're bringing a different compound tire. They're going to make a softer blend of rubber for those Goodyear tires. It's going to make for different tire wear. We're going to see how those cars react to that surface with those cars. And these guys are all going to fight for a spot in Phoenix. There's going to be carnage. I don't think these guys are going to lift, you know, if it's the last corner of the last lap in the race. I don't think these guys are going to be giving out any favors. Whoever's in the lead or whoever's in second, they're going to go and they're going to make a pass to win this race. They're going to make it to Phoenix, and this one is going to be a wild one down in Martinsville.
Yeah, it's going to be crazy to see. Will always gives us the great NASCAR news of the week. Let's flip it over to Jack, and let's talk about college basketball. You gave us 1 through 5 last week with some sleepers. Give us 6 through 10 in your power rankings.
Yeah, if you remember last week, it was Kansas, Bama, Iowa State, Duke, Houston was the 1 through 5. Let's start off with 6. It's Gonzaga. I was debating so hard to put him at 5 with Houston, but I just thought Houston had a little bit of edge. But this Gonzaga roster, I love. It's so experienced. They have returning seniors, Graham Ike, Ryan Nemhart, Nolan Hickman, and Ben Gregg. They all averaged 9 or more points a game. Last season, Nemhart and Ike averaged like 15 plus. They had a really solid transfer class. Khalif Battle averaged 14 points per game last year at Arkansas. And a dynamic guard from Pepperdine, Michael Ajayi, I believe is how you say his name, 17 points per game and 10 rebounds from the Pepperdine transfer. Let's not forget, last year Gonzaga was actually a really good team. Like, they were top 7 in the country going into March. They just ran it to Purdue. And Purdue was a train last year who just lost to UConn in the national championship. And this is one thing that Mark Few has not done over the past few years. He has not set up this team with a hard out-of-conference schedule, especially since their conference is like pretty easy. Their out-of-conference schedule this year now is very, very hard. Baylor, ASU, SDSU, West Virginia, Kentucky, UConn, UCLA. That's 4 teams in the top 25, plus a couple other D1 that are very good in the Power 5. So I think Gonzaga, really good roster, really good schedule coming up. This team, I like them a lot this year. Number 7 is Baylor. This Baylor team has lost a lot of talent coming into the season. Walter, Dennis, Bridges, Missy all left the team. They all averaged 10 points per game or higher. They were basically their best players, but Scott Drew went into this offseason with his mindset, had a crazy offseason. He added number 4 ranked freshman VJ Edgecombe, who is basically a human highlight reel. I mean, Edgecombe played on the national Bahamas team this past summer with DeAndre Ayton, Buddy Hield, Eric Gordon, all seasoned veteran in the NBA. He was the best player on that team this summer, and it wasn't really close if you look at the stats. They also picked up number 28 freshman Robert Wright to add on with Edgecombe. And the transfer pickups were big. Norchard Omayo from Miami, very solid center. And then Jeremy Roach, who is just a seasoned veteran, senior now. He played at Duke for the first 3 years of his college career, was great in March Madness for 2 seasons with Duke. And let's not forget, they still returned 2 amazing rotation players in Jaden Nunn, Langston Love. I think this team really revolves around Edgecombe, and with an amazing supporting cast around him. You got Omier, you got Roach, you got a couple other guys on the team that I mentioned before. I really like this Baylor team. I think he has set himself up for a great team. They should be staying top 10 in the country throughout the season. Number 8, let's get to the SEC. It's Auburn. Johni Broome. That's their main guy. He's a dog. He's contention for National Player of the Year. Averaged 16 and 8 last year with 118 offensive rating. If you know what that means, I mean it's a very, very high number for Johni Broome. They also returned very solid role players in Chad Baker-Mazara and Denver Jones. The additions, I think, will really help out Broome. They got J.P. Preggs from Furman. He averaged 18 points per game last year. They got Miles Kelly from Georgia Tech, averaged 14 points per game last year. And then the freshman class, they got a 5-star freshman, Tahad Pettiford, and a 4-star Ja'Kai Howard. Look, this is an amazing supporting cast around Broome, and Broome, a contender for National Player of the Year. But every single year, it feels like Auburn falls short in March. Bruce Pearl is going to have to show us this year with this amazing roster if he can actually win in March, or it's going to get loud for his job security. Now, let's stay in the SEC. Number 9, I got Tennessee with the Volunteers. Losing Dalton Connect was very rough for Rick Barnes and company, but I think he built himself a very strong squad coming into the season. They still have reliable point guards, Zakai Ziegler, and solid role guys like Gainey, Masak, but I think the transfer additions were just beautiful from Coach Barnes. Philippe Akpora from Ohio State, Darling Stone Dubar from Hofstra, Igor Milicic from Charlotte, Chaz Lanier averaged 20 points per game at South Florida. All 4 of those guys are great transfer adds. Along with Bishop Boswell is coming in as a 4-star freshman. I expect this Tennessee team to kind of linger around the top of the SEC, walk into March comfortably with a 2-4 seed. Let's round it out at number 10, go to the ACC with UNC. They lost a couple key guys from last year, Cormac Ryan, Harrison Ingram, both great seniors. They had to leave. And another great senior was Armando Bacot, but I mean, he had to leave at some point. He played Zion in his freshman season. This guy has been in college basketball for so long. He's finally off the UNC team, but now they got a senior in R.J. Davis, who is another contender for National Player of the Year. They also have Ellie Cadeau, who was a 5-star coming into the last season, but didn't really have that great of a freshman season. Only averaged 7 points per game. Hopefully, he can start to turn it up this year for UNC. And then added transfer-wise, they added Cade Tyson from Belmont. He averaged 16 points per game. They got a solid forward in the transfer portal. Ben Allen Lubin from Vanderbilt. He averaged 12 and 6. I think the fireworks they made was from the freshmen they recruited. They got 2 5-stars, number 8 player in the country, Ian Jackson, and number 11, Drake Powell. Hubert Davis has himself a good roster. It's just how can he manage all the talent? And RJ Davis is going to have to learn to pass the ball, because if he just shoots the ball like he did in March, this UNC team will not be good.
Yeah, and I think one of the things we don't forget, I'm going to go all the way back to the top of your list and go to number 6. Gonzaga changes their conference, right? Yeah. Goes to a team, they go to a conference that will give them more talent to work for and to improve on. And I think a lot of people are going to be very surprised with how Gonzaga builds their team, moves on, gets good competition, and gets ready for March Madness, because they've came short in recent years. Yeah. Let's switch our focus over to the college football landscape, right? We're coming down to the wire, right? Where there's some big games coming up, but with this 12-team playoff this year, it is going to be interesting to see how things shape out. Will, give us kind of your thoughts on what's like a little sleeper team. Who's gonna get into that 12 seed? Give us your thoughts.
So I'm gonna give 2 sleeper teams. It's gonna be Indiana and Texas A&M. To me, they're pretty much the same team. They're kind of the second tier when you think about their conferences. You know, Indiana, the Big Ten. You got Ohio State. You got Michigan having it down your butt. They're Michigan. Penn State. Those are the big boys. Then on the second half, Oregon, now in the Big Ten, they're number 1 in the country. So you got to think about them too. And then obviously Texas A&M and the SEC. We know the top guys in the SEC are always going to be Bama, Georgia, Texas, teams like that. And then you got Texas A&M kind of in that second level. But both of these teams, they're playing amazing football right now. They both have massive, massive games coming up that will affect their conference championship. They'll affect the playoffs. Texas A&M playing Texas at the end of the season to maybe get a bid into that SEC championship game. And then Indiana plays Ohio State in just a couple weeks. They go into the shoe. If Indiana could beat Ohio State in the shoe, they're pretty much a lock for the Big Ten championship. And, you know, depending on who they play, they could be an undefeated Big Ten championship team. Could we see Curt Cignetti and this Indiana team be number 1 in the country? Obviously, they'd probably have to end up beating Oregon, but should that happen, they might be best team in the country. And then on A&M side, you know, if they can beat Texas at home with the 12th man behind them and then win the SEC, those are 2 teams who, at the start of the season, many people probably didn't even have them finishing ranked, much less in the top 4. They're going to be slated into that college football playoff. They'll get a first-round bye. This is all, again, hypothetical. None of this may or may not happen, but stuff like that, I think, is what makes the 12-team playoff so beautiful this year.
Well, and especially with the conference realignment, if you look at Indiana and A&M, both these schools have been amazing, right? They've played great, tough opponents, but their toughest tests are coming at the end of the year, right? Yeah. Ohio State is the second to last game for Indiana, right? They play Michigan State and Michigan right before they get to Ohio State. And Michigan, yes, they've struggled this year, but they're still a true test. It's great to see this conference realignment, and it's great to see how these tests are going to come. Jack, give us your thoughts on some of these teams.
Yeah, I think with the thing with Indiana, it's even if they lose to Ohio State at Ohio State and they still have 1 loss on the schedule, they're getting in the playoff. The schedule they've had and the teams they basically ran through to get here, then they got to beat Michigan State and Michigan. I think Indiana will get in even if they lose Ohio State. But a team I like that is undefeated, they're going totally under the radar, feels media-wise. They don't get enough talk at all, is Iowa State. They're tied for 11th with Clemson, and nobody talks about them at all, but they have a tough schedule coming up. They're going to have to go home against Texas Tech, and then they have Kansas, they have Utah, and they have home against Kansas State. But if they can run the table, and then they have BYU probably in the Big 12 championship, even though what happens in that game, their schedule, their strength of schedule in the past, I think will get them into the top 12. I really like this Iowa State team, and a team that I don't like, and I think it will drop out, is Clemson. Look, they had that really bad loss against Georgia to start the season, and then they've had a really easy schedule since then. They've been beating teams pretty easily. I like Clay Klubenik, but look, this Clemson team does not excite me at all. They're going to have to play Miami at some point this year, and when they do, I do not expect a good result.
Well, and Clemson's always struggled to beat those teams, and when they have a dominant team, you know it right away, right? They have the big win at the start, they cruise through, go to the ACC championship, boom, it's great. But this Clemson team, you don't really see that. We're going to kind of flip the script. We're talking about these teams, right? And as we're talking right now, Boise State is up 35-10, right? They're winning, right, against San Diego State. But Ashton Jeanty has 15 carries for 37 yards after a bad week this last week, right? So it makes the question, is this Boise State team really ready for this 12-team playoff. Because think about it. If Genty doesn't get going and they're still going to beat teams by 20-plus points, they proved against a good UNLV team that they can win. Do they really have a shot at like competing and maybe winning a game or two in this college football playoffs? Will give it to us.
Yeah, I think they definitely do. They go into Oregon Autzen Stadium and they almost pull off that upset. Now, Oregon was not the Oregon they are now the first half of the season, but that's not the point. You go into Autzen, you play a very competitive game. But like I said, Jason mentioned, Ashton Genty, 15 carries, 37 yards, coming off of a bad game for Genty standards. A good game for all running backs, but for Genty standards, pretty bad game last week. Maddox Madsen, the quarterback for Boise State, 20 of 25, 261, 4 tutties. They're doing fine passing-wise, but I think one of these big teams, should Boise make the college football playoff, is going to say, look, we shut down Genty. We shut down this Boise State offense. I understand Madsen's doing great things, but this is against San Diego State. Folks, Penn State, Happy Valley is not going to be Qualcomm Stadium. You got to do something better, and I think if these big premier defenses can stuff the run, if they can stop Genty, which is a big ask, but right now looks doable, I don't see Boise State doing enough to be in that college football playoff conversation past the first round.
But you got to think about, right? These teams that stop Genty, it's been air raid, over the top, and that's what you got to think about, right? If you want to stop one part of this offense, the other part is clicking, right? And if you get in the college football playoffs and one team's like, we're going to stop Genty, right? And he's been that guy, right? That we want to stop, like, scouting report on Tuesday or Thursday, you're like, okay, we need to stop this guy, right? But they're proving that I don't think that some of these good teams, some of these top 8 teams, top 8 from that 8 to 12 range are able to stop Boise State, right? Stop both sides of that offense because it takes a very good team, right? Oregon, yes, they weren't as good, but Oregon slowed them down and they struggled. And they're the number 1 ranked team. It's going to be interesting. Jack, give us your thoughts.
Yeah, it's the question for Boise State is who they're going to get at the 5 seed. The 5 seed is a very weird spot because it's probably just going to be the second, maybe the third best team in the country. It's probably going to be a leftover SEC team, or it could be a Big Ten team, or it could even be Notre Dame. For some reason, the AP Top 25 poll voters, they just love Notre Dame. I don't understand why. They lost at home to NIU. Like, this team, it's a solid Notre Dame team, but I think if you put them up against any of the top 10 teams right now, they get smoked. But whoever gets that 5 seed, if it's a Notre Dame, if it's a Penn State, I think Boise State could be looking at an upset.
Well, yeah, and you can always, like, Notre Dame has always been that team that, like, they're on their heels. They're waiting for that big knockout blow. You never know. And Boise State could be that team that, like, sits them down. Let's flip our focus from college football to now these quarterbacks going to college football and going to the draft. We're going to talk about some quarterbacks coming in because there's been some big news. Bleacher Report today dropped an article saying Cam Ward's going to be going number 1 over Shedeur Sanders. Let's just talk about the quarterbacks overall. Will, give us your thoughts.
Okay, so I'm going to be honest. I don't love Cam Ward over Shedeur Sanders. Now, these guys are both super experienced in college football. Cam Ward starting at Incarnate Word, playing a couple years up at Wazoo and now at Miami after actually declaring for the draft this last offseason. I like Shedeur more. I think he's a better passer. He likes to stand in the pocket. He doesn't throw a lot of bad footballs. You saw he took a lot of sacks last year, led the nation in sacks, and part of that was definitely attributed to the fact that his O-line wasn't great, but he just isn't making bad throws. He's not forcing things he doesn't like, and I think that really plays into him being a good quarterback. Now, this does not mean Cam Ward is bad by any means. He's got Miami doing what Miami hasn't done since probably 2001, and that's be a very legitimate college football national championship contender. But I just like Shedeur Sanders more a little bit as a passer. I think Cam Ward's a great improviser. We've seen it's kind of a joke how cool, how calm he is in the pocket. But I just think I got Shedeur just a little bit over Cam Ward.
Yeah, the debate right now in the NFL with the rookies or the sophomore QBs is the experience they have coming in and benching them or starting them. If I was a manager right now, say if I was the Panthers with the first pick, I would be picking Shedeur Sanders, but I would sit him for the first year. The guy needs to sit. He's a prospect. You're talking about if you want to win right now, you draft Cam Ward. If you're in that type of position, you draft Cam Ward. But Shedeur Sanders is a prospect. I think as talent-wise, he is better than Cam Ward, but it all depends on what you do. If you want to win now, go get Dylan Gabriel. But if you want to sit guys, you get Shedeur Sanders. It all matters what the GMs do. But I think if if you're the Panthers sitting at 1, you pick Shedeur and you start him game 1, you're just going to get the same cycle that you got with Bryce Young.
Well, I think that's what a lot of people forget is some of these quarterbacks, when you draft them, they need to sit. Some of
Yeah.
the great quarterbacks in the NFL sat for a year or two, learned, and then showed out, right? Rodgers, Brady, Breeze. You can think of all-time greats who have sat. Even like Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson sat for half a camp, right? The good quarterbacks. And I think what a lot of people aren't talking about is how good this quarterback class is. You're looking at Shedeur Sanders, Cam Ward, Quinn Ewers, Carson Beck, Jalen Miller, Dylan Gabriel, Drew Aller, Miller Moss. Like, you can go down this list, and I can see 20 quarterbacks. What's it's really going to come down to is how well they do in the combine, right? It's going to be the testing. It's going to be their wingspan, their throw power, and it's always the time where some quarterback at the bottom of the list, like Daniel Jones, comes up and gets highly ranked.
Yeah, and the thing I wanted to point out is there's a lot of these guys, they're juniors. You think Jalen Milroe Jr., Garrett Nussmeier Jr., Drew Aller Jr., Miller Moss Jr., all these guys have another year if they want it, and those teams would take them back. When you think about Jaden Daniels, Bo Nix, those guys who have been in college for what felt like forever, those are the guys performing well in the NFL because they've had so many starts under their belts. These guys, especially if you're Nussmeier, Aller, Moss, even Jalen Murrow to a certain extent, if you don't feel like you're going to go really high in the draft and go to a team that will develop you and do really well, you stay another year. We have been proven that the more college football reps you get, regardless of where you play, they're going to be better in the NFL. You get more time to develop. I mean, you see a defense, that's all that matters. Live reps are what matter in football, regardless of what position or what level you're at. So I think those guys really have to contemplate, do I want to go to the combine? Do I want to look bad? Do I have to go sit behind somebody for 10 years before I even get a shot? Or do I stay at Alabama for another year and then in next year's class be the consensus number one guy?
Yeah, I think the thing with this draft class, Jason, you said it was good. I would say it's deep. Good-wise, first rounders, I would say 2, maybe 3. Ewers is definitely out of my first round. I think Carson Beck is out of my first round. I would put Gabriel, Sanders, and whoever the third one is. I was talking Cam Ward, the third one. It's a deep class. The thing talking about Shedeur Sanders, last thing before we end it off, is Shedeur is a prima donna. We all know this. If he did go to the Panthers and they told him to sit 1 year, that would be a dilemma, and that would just be a whole thing. We'll see how it shapes out later in March.
Well, and Deion Sanders would obviously have a fit. He'd be like, I want one of my boys to be playing for a team that will start him right away.
Yeah.
But I don't think he's ready to start right away. I think that will do it for us. Thank y'all from the Bill Austin Radio Studio. This is Bottom of the Sixth. I am Jason Teeter.
I'm Will Anderson.
And I'm Jack Kemler.
And you guys have a great and safe Friday night.
Say y'all.
While others are sleeping, we're up late covering all of your sports news. The NFL, NBA, WNBA, NHL, MLB, Champions League, college sports, and more. The Breakdown After Dark is there for all of your sports needs. Get a pillow, tuck yourself in, and tune in on Tuesday nights from 10:30 to 11:30 p.m. for The Breakdown After Dark.